How's it going, everyone? Jiivita here with a release overview for testing 249. This has been labeled by the devs as a technology testing preview sort of thing, to very loosely paraphrase the patch notes. In short, this is to test the foundations that have been laid down for, users being able to create local universes for single player and local co-op multiplayer type situations. So outside of the main MMO and all that sort of thing. This also brings into the game all of the Malay weapons and shields that have been highly anticipated. It also modifies how the skill pages work. All of that I would more or less consider placeholders, because this update again is focused on ensuring that the local universe will work as intended, basically for everybody, beyond just what they have tested internally. Okay, so taking a look at the main attraction, first off, you need to make sure that you have the debugging menu enabled. So you can just hit F1, and if this bar at the top appears, you're good to go. Otherwise, you can come over to the main menu, go to settings, make sure you're on the game tab, and it'll be all the way at the bottom, debugging menu. I think by default this is now set to be off, but you can just toggle it to be on. Close out of that, or really you don't have to, but hit F1, and now you have access to this development UI or debugging UI. And before we get too far, eventually all of this will be tied into the regular user interface of the game. Whenever you start it up, it will ask you, oh, do you want to do a local universe, the MMO, etc., etc. So users will be able to kind of fast track to whichever side of things they want to explore first, so to speak. So just for the time being, while everything's under development, well, everything's kind of in the development UIs. And right down here, there is local Sandbox. That's now, I guess, the local universe. This was originally creative, and they keep changing the name and improving on the feature. But anyway, we can click on this. Right here up the top, you have 3 buttons, so you can administer a remote universe, which is pretty awesome. They go through a lot of nitty-gritty details on the patch notes, so if you're interested in those, there'll be a link in the description. But in short, users will be able to set up essentially kind of a distributed universe across many machines with one kind of universe server or whatever, which is basically the sanctum. And yeah, if users decide they want to, they can essentially set up kind of like their own MMO-ish universe, distributed across many machines. So that is pretty crazy. Not to mention when you factor in, like, okay, these are running on the user's PCs, they can customize the rule sets how they see fit by editing the files. It's a very much a coding adventure. It's not like they can just turn on a bunch of switches, but I'm getting sidetracked here. You can join remote universe, so you can join somebody else's universe provided they've set everything up. And there's even this published server list, so you could set up your own universe and publish it to kind of like a public server list, kind of in the name there, and yeah, have other people drop into your universe and say hi. And of course, there's create new local universe. This is what you would pick if you want to do essentially single player. So you got your name must be greater or equal to 5 characters, blah blah blah. You can name it. And yeah, it doesn't like this name because I already have one by that name, but you just change it and now I could create this universe. Under local universes, you can see I already have 2, so my universe and of course Jiivitaverse, why not? We can fire this up, and right here is where you can specify ports for port forwarding, and your external IP address. If you've ever set up, say, your own Minecraft server for other people to connect via the internet, you should be fairly familiar with this. Otherwise, you might check out tutorial for that or do some research elsewhere. I'm not going to cover that in this video, but go ahead and start this universe. It will pop up one of these windows, one for the Discovery universe, or server, that is essentially the Sanctum, and then one for every world that you have created. So I have, however many worlds that is right there. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, looks like 5 worlds. You can delete the world, change the world display name, etc., etc. There's even a set permissions down here that will set for that account the permission levels for a given character name. So you don't have to know the account name, that's considered private anyway, but I could do for, I guess, Test Vita or whatever name I'm using, and that would set the permission level for my entire account for this universe. So you have everything from no permissions all the way up to admin. I don't recommend trying to play on admin just because you can bypass all beacon lock type permissions, and not to mention you have admin written across the middle of your screen to remind you that you're playing as an admin. But certainly you could play as a developer and have access to all of the development UIs, which there's some pretty cool things in there to play around with, like the weather console, the lighting console. You can kind of override the weather, make your own custom weather combinations, and control the time of day and whatnot. So pretty cool features hidden in there. There's probably also lots of things that can really mess up your game/server, so tread lightly. But certainly for just tester right here, you could just give that character, or that account rather, access to the give menus, kind of like on the current testing servers, etc., etc. I believe the external quality assurance and internal quality assurance, there's slight variations between those, of course, but I believe either one of those would allow the user to fly on the server. So that can be handy if you want to give just enough to be able to fly, but you don't necessarily want to give them, access to a whole bunch of stuff. But anyway, enough on that. Once you have this all set up and you have at least one world that you can spawn on, you'll be able to join your universe. So let's get out of this user permission. If you do want to create your very first world, you just, of course, click on New World. There is an option to do a flat world, which will generate more or less instantly. If you don't do a flat world and you use some of these configs down here, it took me I didn't really time it. It seemed like 15 to maybe 20 minutes to generate a exo-sized world, which are a little bit smaller than your standard world, but you have your exo, standard, and large worlds right there. And the patch note says that can take anywhere from 5 minutes to much longer, just depending on your machine. So my computer, 6 cores, 12 threads, seemed to take about 15-20 minutes. It does kind of break it down into several steps and gives you roughly ETAs for each step. So moving on to that, you can now click this button, join this universe, and you will swap over to your local universe. It even has its own amazing sanctum that's custom for the local universe. This was created by Apt, from what I've gathered on the test release notes. And yeah, this place is crazy. I could devote an entire video to it. In fact, it'll probably be part of the intro and probably squeak in shots of this place as much as possible. But yeah, so once you're here, you can of course join your whatever world it starts you on. It of course directly you to creating a character initially, and you'd go from there, sort of thing. So very nice. If you have elevated permissions, again, you'll have access to these development UIs. My favorites are this Detach camera mode. Basically detaches your camera. You move very slowly, but it's handy for getting kind of cool cinematic shots. There is God mode. If you don't have the proper permissions for God mode, it can immediately disconnect you from the server because you're breaking the rules, so to speak. But you can turn that on if you have the proper permission level for it. And where is it? So there's the lighting console. That's great for overriding the time of day. And then there's also, this weather console that you can kind of override and customize weather effect combinations, so to speak. So really cool stuff to play around with in there. Probably can mess up a lot of stuff in here as well, so tread lightly. There is a world list right here that will essentially allow you to teleport between all of the available worlds, assuming you have the appropriate permission level to actually do that. Otherwise, it might just, throw an error or do nothing, or etc., etc. So, cool stuff there. Once you're in your world, well, that's kind of you go forth and play sort of thing. There is some really cool adjustments coming to the local universe, in that difficulty and things like that will eventually, it's not quite in this release just yet, but difficulty will be per biome instead of per planet. So that means you can start off on your starter planet, and if you venture into another biome, it could be considered a completely different difficulty, and blocks might have armor on it. You might run into more dangerous creatures, but also find higher valued resources or higher tiered resources. So that will add some pretty amazing kind of exploration components to exploring a given world, because each world will have kind of a variety of difficulties. So that is really cool. Sounds like that's going to be mostly for just the local universe. However, they did mention or hint that some of it would come over to the MMO side of things, at least for like creature spawning. Like Wildstock will favor the big open fields, and Cuddle Trunks might favor the mountains, etc. So that would be really cool to see if you can kind of use that information to target a particular mob. Like say you want to Roadrunner feathers or hopper cores, things like that, and go to those types of terrains that those creatures favor. That's pretty cool. So the overall goal that the devs are kind of shooting for is to be able to fully experience the game on a single player level with as few as 3 worlds. So that is actually pretty cool. And really, I guess that's going to have to boil down to having several gym types on a single world. So I don't know if you have like, okay, here's a gym world and like every biome has a different gym in it sort of thing. There's also, they're talking about adding essentially ways for accessing all of the different colors of blocks, pigments, etc., etc. So you'll be able to get all the colors of goo, I suppose, or some sort of, they called it, I believe, like an injection something or another for having different colors of gleam, so to speak. So again, being able to access all an MMO's worth of block colors on just a handful of worlds. So that is really cool and exciting. But it sounds like the devs are working very hard to ensure that single player players can enjoy the entire game with as few as 3 worlds. So that is really nice, considering each additional world that you're running, that is additional RAM and CPU and etc. So you don't want to have to generate upwards of 50 worlds just trying to gain access to something as simple as extra block colors. So very exciting stuff right there. Once you are done playing around on your local universe, all you have to do is come back to this sandbox window. If it's closed, you can of course come down here, reopen it with the local sandbox button right there, and there is a return to MMO button right here. Simply click it, goes through a little loading screen, and now you are back on the MMO side of things. Keep in mind that the local universe is still running in the background. There's of course a shutdown button here. If you close out the game, it automatically shuts all of this down for you. So pretty cool. Another little tidbit is that all of these windows, if they get a little cluttered up for your liking, you can just close them out. If you need to reopen them up, I'm not really 100% sure. Like this window is for the actual universe server or the Sanctum side of things, where these other windows, there's one for each planet. So again, you can close them out, but you can also simply double click them and it essentially minimizes the window. So if you feel like you'll need to look at these logs later on, you can just minimize them, or of course, just hit F1 and don't look at them. But anyway, just a little tidbit to throw out there. And coming over to the skill page, initially it probably looks like I'm absolutely cheating right here, but this is a change that's been made to facilitate single player basically, and one character being able to more or less do everything. So up here you can see that I have spent 359 skill points. That is pretty crazy. So basically what they have done is they come through and pretty much all of the linked abilities, at least as far as crafting and non-combat skills, they have essentially been unlinked, meaning you can take both versions. So coming down here, if you're familiar, all of these crafting skills would be more or less linked with each other. I believe these three are all linked together, and then these two are linked together, forcing you to take one or the other. So to facilitate one character that can craft everything, all of these skills have been unlinked, and not to mention the skill cap per skill page has been increased to this crazy number. So if you come over here, you can see that the new max level will be 190, which is kind of mind-boggling. And so yeah, that allows you to more or less overspend skill points compared to what has previously been. Another really nice thing is that the skill points are no longer shared between all of the skill pages. So in other words, once you hit level 50 and you have 100 skill points to spend, you can spend that 100 skill points for each of your skill pages. So in other words, you can have multiple skill pages without diluting your skill points among the different skill pages. So once you're level 30, you can be 30 across all of your skill pages. That will make skill pages much more useful during the leveling process. And really pretty much, I mean, if you have just a few skill pages unlocked and you're level 50 or level 75, you pretty much won't have a need for any more skill points, because that allow you to, of course, fill out your entire tree plus some extra. So if you're doing a DPS build, you could get tax epic and other niceties that normally you wouldn't be able to get, and you'd be able to do that for all of your skill pages. So after a certain point, it's kind of like, oh, I got more skill points, well, I guess I'll fill out augment crafting for kicks, basically. So that is really pretty cool. Not to mention, it does give you a long-term kind of goal for, I eventually can fill out this entire skill tree, even though it's not exactly necessary, and do more and more on one skill page instead of having to switch between the skill pages. So given that you can go all the way up to 190 now, the experience points required per level, that continues via the function that was already in the game. Currently, that's a placeholder. There's been lots of comments on the forums of how this really throws off the amount of experience required to get a given amount of qubits, essentially increasing the grind. Again, that's just a product of the pre-existing functions that were in the game. Qubits, as you level up, that increases linearly, whereas the experience increases exponentially. So as you can see, the chasm between those two values increases over time. That's a placeholder, and will likely change in the future. So hopefully that alleviates some people's concerns. They're not trying to make it crazy hard to get qubits. It's just not really the focus of this testing update. So, okay, and jumping over to the new Malay and shield weapons, as you can see, they look really nice. Just about every single one of these I want to hang on my wall as decorations, and in fact that is a hugely requested feature so far from a lot of users. Maybe at some point they'll implement that, who knows. Anyway, as you can see, there's also emotes for each of kind of the material types. So you have, your wood, stone, metal, alloy, gem, and lucent variations. And jumping over to the knowledge tree, you can take a little bit of a closer look at these. If you take a look at a diamond heavy sling bow, you can see that the base damage is 1,200. Taking a look at the sword, it's 1,500. So each material type has a healthy upgrade over the sling bow counterpart versus the Malay weapon counterpart. It doesn't sound like a huge difference at first, but when you take into account skills, you can see that the diamond sword is doing practically 1,000 more damage than the sling bow. 4,275 versus the 3,420. So not quite 1,000, but pretty darn close. Not only that, taking a closer look at the Malay weapons, you can see that there's a wealth of, Malay-oriented stats on each of these weapons. But first off, we have degrees of swing right here, and that is essentially each Malay weapon, and even the shields kind of work the same way. They have a cone of effect, essentially. So, in other words, unlike if you're trying to use a hammer as a Malay weapon, with these Malay weapons, you simply swing the weapon and you don't have to have your cursor or your targeting reticle perfectly on the creature. It just kind of hits everything in front of you based off of this cone. So that is really nice. Not to mention everything inside of that cone is hit up to this max enemy's hit number right here. And different material types will have a different max enemy's hit. So in other words, you can hit up to 2 creatures inside of this cone of attack with each swing. So you kind of have this built-in AoE type effect going on. Not only that, you can forge the shields and Malay weapons, so there is a boon to increase not only the reach of the weapon, which by the way is not affected by control, so you can't just take a whole bunch of control to turn your Malay weapons into basically, fist weapons or so to speak. But via the forging, you can augment the swing reach, the max enemy's hit, as well as all of these other stats that you normally would be able to do for sling bows. And as far as shields, you can forge extra degrees of protection as well as damage reflection. Notably, you can also make a loot magnet shield, so that is very nice as well. Another cool thing about shields is that if you notice, there's actually stats that have to do with critical effects. So you can literally have a critical block that will block more damage than just your standard block. So you can, of course, also put all of those type of forges onto the shields as well if you wanted to make essentially a crit based shield build, I suppose, or if you're just a crit based DPS user, you'll be able to get some extra mileage out of those critical strike skills when using a shield as well. So very, very nice. If you notice down here, it has listed values for both kinetic and impulse armor. All the shields that I've noticed so far will do these 2 things symmetrically. If you're unfamiliar, kinetic armor is essentially all of your single target attacks, whereas impulse or armor is all of your AoE attacks. So your bombs, hoppers, etc. are impulse. Your wild stock, spitter projectiles, cuddle trunk projectiles, that's all kinetic armor sort of thing. The really nice thing is that the shields will also protect you from impact damage as well. You can think of impact damage as being slammed against the wall or your fall damage, so to speak. So as long as you're looking vaguely in the right direction, this will save you from taking some fall damage. So I did a quick test jumping off of a cliff without a shield, using a shield, and then amusingly enough with a extra shield or an item simply forged with the bouncy feet quirk that makes everything basically feel like you're landing on a trampoline. However, apparently it assumes all blocks have the maximum hardness, which dramatically increases the damage and was still very much a fatal experience, even with the shield up to mitigate some of it. So if you're unfamiliar, impact damage or fall damage is based off of whatever you impact. So landing on rock hurts more than landing on soil, leaves, etc. Okay, well, I think that covers everything more or less in this update. Like I said, there is a lot of nitty-gritty involved with the local universe side of things in the patch notes, so do check out the link in the description if you want to learn more about that. Some really exciting possibilities with users setting up their own universes that are then essentially publicly available to whoever, particularly when you factor in the possibility of modded universes to where the rule sets or whatnot, or even new features are implemented by the users themselves. So if you don't like, say, the grind of having to gather millions of blocks to craft some of the fancier stuff, that could potentially be alleviated via user ran servers, so to speak. So really exciting. Not to mention, you can basically have a public list of user ran servers that if you want to play under a modified rule set but don't necessarily want to have to set it all up yourself, that's certainly a option, and could sound like with a bit of dedication you could have an even more varied and vast universe on the user ran side of things versus the actual developer ran MMO universe. So pretty mind-boggling right there that is even a possibility in the first place. So very exciting stuff. Not to mention the swords and shields are beautiful and fun to play with. Something I think I forgot to mention is that all of the sound effects associated with those items are placeholders and due to change at some point. But anyway, I think that is enough rambling. I will give a quick update. I apologize I didn't get around to an Oort video. It was intended. I even had some displays set up. However, the last time I worked, I started coming down with symptoms. Thankfully, I was able to quarantine myself. Later, I found out I was positive for COVID, and however, I'm already recovered. I didn't have to be in the hospital. Just had the sad consequence of, I slept through all of the holidays, slept through when I was supposed to be making a video for the Oort video, and so I apologize for missing out on all of that. But thankfully, I'm essentially recovered, out of quarantine, and did not have to be in the hospital. But at any rate, this was Jiivita. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, be sure to hit that like button, subscribe if you want to see more like this, and if there's anything you didn't like, please let me know down below. Also, if you like my channel, want to get cool perks, check out my Patreon page. Until next time, peace.